This is your communication podcast with Teresa. I'm sure you're super excited because this is the last Vodcast for our unit number 1. We just want to wrap things up by looking at some of the Romans and then the elocutionary movement, and then we are done. Here we go. Woo! So the dude who was super influential in talking about persuasive communication was Cicero, or as we say in Germany, Cicero. So what did he actually contribute? He actually said that there are 5 canons of persuasive speaking that should be kept in mind. And yes, guys, a little bit of a Latin session for you today, because the canons are inventio, dispositio, pronunciatio, elocutio, and memoria. Why didn't they make a memoritio? Who knows? Anyway, so let's have a look. Inventio, you can hear invention is part of this word. And in this case, we are not looking at inventing evidence, but it is your ability to provide evidence, to find evidence, to dive into a topic and to bring the proofs that you have found to the speech scenario or to the persuasive speech scenario. So let's just get this right. It's not about you inventing proof. It's about you finding proof. Dispositio, you can hear it. Disposition is the word that is hidden here. And it's not your disposition that Cicero is talking about here. It is the disposition of the speech, as in, how do you arrange your parts? Is there an intro, a body, and conclusion? Do your ideas flow logically from one to the next? And is there a coherence about your persuasive message? Number 3 is a pronunciatio. Pronunciation is the word hidden here. And it, of course, has to do with you not mumbling into your beard, but properly pronouncing what you have to say. So make sure that you are looking up and that you're letting your voice travel and that you have a certain projection. Elocutio, once again, we know the word here, elocution. So that has to do with the way you're using language. Elocution doesn't mean that you know all the technical terms and bring in all the jargon for your speeches. It's actually very much the opposite. It is about finding out who your audience is and then using appropriate language for that audience. Younger audiences, of course, less jargon, shorter sentences, illustrative words. Older audiences, yes, you might get away with some technical terms. You might get away with like beautifully long-winded sentences, which are grammatically correct, of course. But yes, elocution has to do with you choosing the appropriate use of language. And then lastly, we have memoria. So you should know the content of your speech. I am very hesitant to propose memoria as one of the canons to remember for you, because I don't want you to memorize your speech. I want you to remember your speech, and I want you to use cue cards when you are presenting your persuasive message to the public, but I don't want you to read it out, and I don't want you to try and learn it off by heart. It just never comes across the way that it should come across. It sounds very staged. It just comes across as very robotic. So stay away from that. Woo! Just in case you thought Cicero doesn't know what he's talking about, of course he does. Just like Aristotle and Plato, he was an academician and he wrote a lot of books on rhetoric. His shtick is that a real orator must know a lot about many things, and he also makes reference to the artistic proofs of logos, pathos, and ethos that Aristotle already brought up. So he also recognizes that persuasion is not just in the evidence and proofs that are out there, but it also has to do with how the persuasive message is actually being brought forward. Just like Aristotle, Cicero is also nicely embedded in the political persuasive sphere, and his aim, just like Aristotle's and Plato's, was to convince a political audience to support a certain candidate or support a certain ideology. Woo! So moving on from there, actually we are jumping about 2000 years. There were some other developments in rhetoric in the 17th century, pretty much in line with the Enlightenment. People started talking about persuasive messages more and more. All of a sudden, there was a livelier interchange of persuasive messages. This is also the time when newspapers started to pop up and advertisements started to pop up. So yes, of course, there was a newly found interest in rhetoric or influence or communicating persuasively. One of the more noteworthy developments in rhetoric was the elocutionary movement between the 18th and the 19th century. Basically, there it's all about how the speech is delivered. So it still takes on a very strong focus on the communicator. Whereas as we are going further along the timeline into the 20th century, the audience analysis is becoming more and more important. What is quite scary about the elocutionary movement is that they basically said that what is being said is not so important. How it is being said and who says it definitely takes precedence. The problem I have with that is, of course, that there doesn't have to be any substance or any rationality behind what you are bringing up, as long as you're having a je ne sais quoi, a way of actually bringing something across. They're very much embedded in the sophistic tradition of rhetoric. Woo! It is also still quite important to mention that persuasive messages have been studied and used extensively by religious movements or by the church. Religious groupings always look for new members who support the ideology and who support the beliefs of the particular church that is promulgating their faith. Woo! It can be said that the interest in persuasive communication is also very strongly attached to the Enlightenment movement. At some stage in the 1700s, all of a sudden, people wanted to illuminate knowledge so that things can be understood. And these scientists and these innovators and these inventors wanted to persuade audiences of their insights. So the scientific community was very instrumental in reviving the focus on persuasive communication. Woo! Once the newly found interest in persuasive messages and public speaking actually ignited further, there were a lot of academicians who contributed works in the 20th century. The Fundamentals of Speech, for example, by Charles Henry. We also have Public Speaking, which was released in 1915, and carrying on through the entirety of the 20th century. I hope you enjoyed it, Schnookies. Until next time, bye!